King's Quest V on the NES? Seriously? Yeah, it exists. I don't want to say it's rare, but I've never seen a copy until recently, having found this one here that I picked up. Back in the day, I didn't know anyone who had this game. I do remember seeing a small preview in Nintendo Power magazine back in the day, but having never seen it since then, I started to wonder if it ever came out at all. Obviously it did. We're looking at it here. It was ported to the NES in 1991, the original having come out for the PC a year earlier in 1990, and as we saw in the intro screen, this was published by Konami. And for anyone who has never played King's Quest V before, I'll give you a quick rundown on the story. In this game, we play as King Graham, and as this little opening sequence shows us, one day, King Graham leaves the castle to go out for a nice morning walk. And when he returns from his walk, he discovers that the castle and everyone in it is missing. This little owl comes down from the sky. The owl's name is Cedric. And he explains to you that an evil wizard has done this. He's caused the castle and everyone in it to vanish. And so obviously we want to find this wizard and try and get everyone back. Moving to the NES, well, obviously the port is, graphically there's a huge difference. I will show some comparisons here, just to give you an idea of the difference in graphics. It's a huge downgrade. Obviously. It's not knocking on the NES. The NES at the time, it was going on 6 or 7 years old. This was a 256 color VGA game being ported over to the NES, which, I forget offhand is like 16 colors at a time on screen or something like that. So obviously they had to downgrade the graphics immensely. Also, memory is a factor. This game originally came out on floppy disk, but it was on like 5 floppy disks. So uncompressed, probably about 10 megabytes. Compared to the NES version, which is like maybe half a megabyte. So it's literally, a 20th of the size, memory-wise. So again, obviously, huge compromises had to be made. And again, the floppy disk version did not have the voice. So this is all the graphics, basically. Again, that had to be downgraded. From these bitmap style backgrounds to a tile-based background, but they still did a decent job. The screens are varied. The one screen to the next doesn't look similar. They don't reuse tiles a lot like most tile-based scrolling games would have. So they did an okay job on the graphics. It's a little bland in the colors. Again, the NES is very limited in the amount of colors it can display. But still, this game is very boring to look at. A lot of just brown. Everything is brown. But again, they did a decent job with the graphics. They did a pretty good job with the music, as you've heard in the beginning. Intro there. That was a clip from the game. The music is decent. Again, for an 8-bit, port, they did a decent job with the music. The biggest complaint I have with this game so far is the controls. This is the first time I've ever played this game on the NES. I don't have the manual for it, so it was a little confusing at first. Select brings up the little top bar menu where you can pick what action you want to take. You can also access your inventory or the menu system from here. And A seems to do most of the actions, and B cancels. But it's a little clunky. When you need to talk to a person, it seems you have to click right on their head. If you click talk to a person and you just click on their body, it doesn't seem to work, which is kind of silly. Also, it's a little cumbersome getting out of the menu. If select brings the menu up, you would think select would get rid of the menu, but it doesn't. So there's a little things with the controls that are kind of clunky, but at the same time, they did change the controls to better match console style of play. What I mean by that is, unlike Maniac Mansion on the NES, which, by the way, is a better port, don't get me wrong, but Maniac Mansion on the NES, you still move the cursor around on the screen and click where you want your character to move to, as you did with, the mouse-based version on the PC. Well, here the D-pad doesn't move the cursor around on screen. The cursor only pops up when you need to click on something. Otherwise, the D-pad simply moves your character around on the screen. So they did change the control scheme to better suit the console, in my opinion, but at the same time, it's just a little clunky. Obviously, it's not as fluid as using the mouse on the PC. I mean, the game was obviously meant to be played on the PC. These adventure-style games were obviously meant to be played with the mouse. So again, the controls are probably my biggest complaint so far. But otherwise, I mean, everything's intact. I mean, like I said, they did a good job with varying the locations. They did a good job with the music. Everything seems to be there. And from what I can see now, it looks like the game might have a battery backup feature. There is an option here to save, and it looks like you can pick save, and then it asks for it actually asks for a file name. That's interesting. So you can actually use the little keyboard comes up here, and we can name the file. That's pretty cool. So let me just turn the NES off, and we'll turn it back on here, and we'll see how this save feature works. So have I played King's Quest 5? Yes. Okay. Okay, it brings me here. So I'll go to the menu, and I believe restore. And nothing happened. What's going on here? I thought I saved my game to a file. What was the point of that? Is this game? Let me check the back of the cartridge here for a second. And by looking at the back of the cartridge, we can see this game does not have a battery backup. All the games with a battery backup had a gold label on the back of the cartridge, like Zelda and Maniac Mansion, Final Fantasy. Look at the back of those cartridges. They've got a gold label on the back. This one has the plain gray label, same color as the cartridge itself, indicating this does not have a battery backup. Wow. So there is a long password system, and it looks like the password is required. I'm assuming the save feature then is only to save your game while you keep the NES system powered on. I don't know how much sense that really makes, especially considering they give you 2 save slots. Now, I think the idea might be that while you have the NES on, you can keep 2 save slots going, and that way if you die or you screw yourself over, you may have another save slot where you can go back. And sometimes in these games, there's maybe a few spots where you can actually screw yourself over by doing something wrong that you shouldn't have been able to do. So being able to go back to a second save slot could come in handy, but again, this is only while the NES system is on. So while I was saying, again, my first time playing this game, initial thoughts is that the controls are the worst thing about this game, but honestly, the worst thing about this game is probably the fact that it does not have a battery backup. Games like this should definitely have a battery backup. And that brings me to my conclusion. So, King's Quest 5 on the NES. Is it worth picking up? Is it worth playing? Honestly, no. Not nowadays. I mean, back in the day, if you didn't have a PC, and this was your only way to play Final Fantasy V, if this was your only way to play King's Quest V, then fine. It was okay. It was an okay port. They did an okay job for the limitations of the system. But it's a huge downgrade from the PC version. Like I said, back then, if you didn't have a PC, which of course a lot of people back then, 1991, a lot of people didn't have a PC. Nowadays, you probably have at least some form of a computer. You're watching this YouTube video after all. Whether it's an Android phone or a tablet or a PC, you have some form of a computer that can emulate DOS well enough to play King's Quest V the way it was meant to be played. So in that regards, there's no reason to pick up this port. Now, I also wonder, this port came out in 1991. By then, the Super Nintendo was either out or it was coming out later that year. I wonder why this game, didn't come out on the Super Nintendo instead. And I wondered that back in the day about a lot of adventure games. Back in the early 90s, early to mid 90s, I was big into a lot of these point-and-click adventure games. Games like, Day of the Tentacle, King's Quest, Space Quest, Monkey Island. A lot of these games, I wondered at the time why they weren't on the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo could handle the equivalent of the VGA graphics. It could display 256 colors on screen at a time, so that shouldn't have been an issue. Also, the cartridges had a lot more memory, and the system even had a mouse. So again, I always wondered why, games like King's Quest VI, for example, were never released on the Super Nintendo. And I guess that sums it up. This port is okay for what it is, but I wouldn't recommend playing it. If you're gonna play one version of, King's Quest V, this certainly is not the one to play. If you're collecting for the NES or you just really want to play this game on the NES, well, fine. It's not that bad. It's not a horrible port by any means.